Hey, so I'm joined here with Damon West. Hey, Damon. Great to have you today.
Aaron, thanks a lot, bro.
So hopefully a lot of people know your story. I want to kind of jump into stuff right off the bat, and I'm curious. I know that Dabo Swinney seems to kind of given you a big break for your speech there, and that kind of took off. What have you learned when you visit these people, all these coaches and great people? Like, what's some of the lessons you're learning now that you've taken your lesson to them? What have you learned?
No, that's great. That's a great question because you got to always be learning, right? And you're around people like Dabo and Nick Saban and people like that. I'll tell you some of the things I learned from Dabo because I'm closest with Dabo of all the coaches in America. Authentic vulnerability. Authentic vulnerability is like when you let your guard down, when you become incredibly accessible to other people. Because when people feel like they can connect with you on that level, that's when things really start happening. That's where real communication happens, by the way, because you have to let your guard down to communicate with other people. And everybody wants to feel like they've been heard. And when you become accessible and vulnerable like that, they feel like you're human and they'll share things with you. And that's where the bonding happens with leadership. Another thing about leadership that I learned from Dabo Swinney is taking action on the things you say you're going to do. This is really important because not a lot of people, you'll find people that talk a good game but don't have the action to back it up.
Okay.
You have to do that. It's mandatory. So when you say you're going to do something, you do it. You follow through on it.
I had to hear that twice, basically, when you said I had to play that in my head real quick. How often do you think people don't follow through with what they say?
Unfortunately, it's become incredibly common in the society we're in right now, especially with social media, that people can just have a soundbite, move on from it, and never have to take action on that.
Or accountability with it.
Accountability with it. Having accountability, it's like our friend Ed Milet says. Yeah. Ed says that, confidence comes when you keep the promises you make to yourself. That's where the accountability is. But the further people get from that, the less they do it, and I think it happens a lot. To answer your question, I think it happens a lot. You see a lot of stuff on social media, and I tell people all the time, be very careful. Social media is not a real world. That's not the real thing happening out there. But people hide behind
Especially for young people, right? Like that's their love language almost nowadays.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a dangerous world to get sucked into. We can bring it back to college football, this world of the transfer portal, Transfer portal is good in some ways. Look, I played college football. I didn't get along with my head coach. I wanted to transfer out, after my redshirt freshman year. I wanted to get out of there. But transferring out is different back then because you had to sit out for a year. There's a consequence to that decision.
You like that better than now?
I mean, I think that there should be the option for players to go somewhere else. I think it's good for the player and the program. If a player doesn't want to be at a program, then for them to have a back door to be able to get out, that's good for the program too. Because the last thing you want is some guy sitting around your locker room
pulling energy away,
becoming a cancer, energy vampire, as John Gordon says. But the transfer portal, also with no consequence attached to it, it sends the wrong signal, in my opinion, to these kids. Because what it says is that, hey, if life gets tough, if there's a difficulty,
run from it.
I'll just run from it. Guess what, man? You're going to have difficulties. Your marriage is going to be difficult. Your jobs are going to be difficult. But I mean, you've got to stick out to the difficult part to get to the good part. And like, I'll go back to marriage. Marriage is one of those lifelong partnership deals. And it should be. I mean, it's not always that way in society, but a marriage is hard because you have to keep working on that every single day. And then when it gets difficult, you can't just run. But there's a lot of athletes that are growing up in the system right now that can just bolt from their problems. Here's the other problem with the transfer portal. You've got about 2,000 college athletes in there, college football players, that don't have a place to go. They get into this portal, and there's no guarantee that another college is going to accept them. So they just walk.
Because it's almost like recruiting again in some ways, right? Like
it is. I know coaches that don't even recruit high school players anymore. They're mid-level Division I college football programs, and they'll say, hey, you know what? I'll just go recruit out of the transfer portal. My coaches are not on the road anymore doing recruiting. The coaches love it.
Right.
But now the high school players
are suffering a little bit,
because now they've got to compete that much harder. I mean, now they're not, instead of looking at maybe going to a mid-level D1, they're looking at a D2, that kind of thing, D3, because the mid-level D1, you can't blame these mid-level D1s. They're getting 4- and 5-star players that didn't work out at Alabama or at Tennessee, you know, and they're like, I need a place to play. Okay, well, Utah State will take you. Let's go.
And you want to play, so.
Absolutely.
So
Utah State wants to win.
For sure. Knowing your story, and kind of going back and me doing some research and seeing where you've come since you've left prison and how you changed your life. If you wouldn't have gotten that breakthrough conversation with Dabo and that invitation, where do you think you'd be right now?
Man, that's a very good question. And the truth is, I have no idea. I know it's not where I am right now. That Dabo Swinney encounter, which I'm going to tell to your people today, because it's so pivotal in my life. It's such a pivotal lesson about always ask the question. The only question you know the answer to is the one you do not ask. That's a no every time. Or as Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You know.
So yesterday.
Was
I used that one yesterday.
Yeah, but it's true.
I tell people that the biggest risk is just not taking the risk, right?
Absolutely.
And you know, not to cut you off here, but like how anxious or nervous even to go up to someone like Dabo, right? Because you're unknown at that time.
Yeah,
right? No. And knowing your story is like you had shot your shot all day long, and I'm curious. Like that is somebody I do want to meet. You know, I'm from South Carolina, so like my wife is a Gamecock, so like there's that rivalry there, right? But
I was just with Connor Shaw a couple of days ago.
Very cool.
Yeah, I was in Columbia, so I was like, "Hey Connor, I'm in Columbia, man. I need you to introduce me to some Morgan Stanley event."
That's very cool.
Yeah.
But just, you know, to be honest, like Dabo's personality was somebody that when you don't know the person, you see a version on TV and you don't know what's real, what's not real.
Yeah.
So same thing like Tom Brady. The first 10 years of Tom Brady's career, I didn't like him. I'm a season ticket holder with the Falcons. So that game still hurts, right? So, but it shifted to I became a fan of the person because I was like, through all the things of adversity, this man still does things right? So like you become fans. So I became a fan of Dabo over the years because even not just the victories and then him getting more known, but it was how he built his program and how he takes care of his people. Yeah. And that's important. Like as I build something, I want to do something to take care of people. So I'm curious if, you know, we all kind of look for that breakthrough moment. And because like now you're on stage with Ed Milet, right? And Andy Frisella, like these people, well, that all happened because you took that shot there. So how do you think you would have kept pushing? Do you think that because you had a message you want to get out there, you were finding what you were getting your message out there before that, right? Using what you could, but you know, what would you, how would the future look? How many years has that been now? Since that conversation.
So that conversation with Dabo was 6 years ago.
Right.
It's January 12th, 2017. So
how many people have you met because of that breakthrough? How many people have been in front of?
Hundreds of thousands.
If not a million,
if not million, but millions in the sense that the books too, because you know, Dabo introduced me to John Gordon. John Gordon's a massive, you know, author and motivational speaker. That changes my entire life.
Yourself occasionally, just like
all the time. I tell my wife almost daily, I can't believe that I get to do this for. I can't believe this is my life, you know, because I was in a prison cell 7 years ago, serving a life sentence, man. One of the biggest. Let me answer your question first. I'll tell you this other big thing. I think that probably jump-started what I'm doing in life, and this is no kidding, by 15 or 20 years.
Okay.
Put that in real terms. We're talking about tens of thousands of days that were shaved off because of this encounter. But I would have kept pushing because that's just my personality.
Sure.
What do I care? Look at my life. What do I care about the odds? I don't look at odds. Are you kidding me, man? I mean, I was in prison 7 years ago serving life. You know, what are the odds that I'm sitting here with you right now in this beautiful home having this conversation? But the reality is that it would have taken a long time, if it ever happened at all. I don't know that it ever does happen. To get to where I am, to break into well, maybe breaking into isn't the right term. But to get into the space where I am in the speaking world, most people never get where I am right now.
I agree, yeah.
But I'm going to tell you something else. One of the biggest metrics I measure the success of life by is like this on my finger right here. Like when I was in prison, and you know, I've talked to a couple of your people here today. One of them particularly that's been to prison. He'll vouch for this. You lay in that prison bunk and you think to yourself, no one's ever going to love me. There's no way I'm going to find somebody that's going to be able to accept the things I've done. All this baggage that I got to carry around, right? This human suffering and baggage. But if I did find that person, their family's not going to like me. There's going to be somebody that's got a problem with Damon West.
They're judging already.
The mistakes that I've made, absolutely, man. But I tell people all the time that man plans and God laughs. You know, when you start trying to make those kind of plans with the universe, you're playing with something you have no idea. My life today is nothing like the fears that I had what it was when I was in prison, and that's what I wanted to get to, because now today I have this family. My father-in-law is one of my best friends. I mean, the first conversation I had with my future in-laws, my father-in-law was like, "Man, it sounds like you made a lot of like horrible choices in life, but you paid a hell of a price." And treat my daughter well will be great. Right. One of my best friends now. I mean, one of my biggest supporters. But we have fears. Fears are the things that hold us back in life. And most fears, and they're not even real. They're in our head. They become giants, monsters in our head. They're not even real, man. Fear makes you see things that aren't there. It makes you believe things that aren't even really happening. The guy that told me the story of the coffee bean, his philosophy is that fear isn't real. He said danger is real. Fear's not real. It's in your head. So it's like an emotion. Emotions you feel, it doesn't mean they're real. It's just something you're feeling in the moment. That's what fear is. But danger is a very real. You have to respect danger.
So you get that breakthrough. Obviously, I think that's a testament to how Dabo is as a person, right? Like I said, I don't know the man, you know him, but his heart's got to be pure because he saw something in you, then was impressed. Like by the way, you had to show up and deliver, right? You couldn't, you had to knock it out of the park, and then he put you in contact with people. One of the things I was curious about, and just being a fan of sports in general, is he calls Nick Saban. And we all think from the outside, oh, these guys hate each other, right? But it's probably a tight network.
Yeah.
And then that, I guess the rest is history from that moment on.
Isn't that cool though? I don't mean to cut you off, but isn't that cool though to hear a guy like Dabo? He sees something that's valuable for his team. The first thing he does is he contacts his biggest rival.
Because
they're big rivals. There's no doubt about that. But that's Dabo Swinney
in itself.
That's like you want to, like you made the comment. Hey, look, you see this guy, you don't know what it's really like. He's as advertised.
Yeah.
His first reaction is, and it wasn't because he was trying to help me at that point, that day, at that moment. It's that he's sitting in the back of the room seeing how his team is responding to the speaker he just brought in. And his first thought was like, man, Nick needs this too.
Right.
So he texts him. Before he comes up and talks to me after the presentation's over, he's telling me, I just text Saban from the back of the room, told him I was watching.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, it's having someone that believes in you. And that's the thing about life. You have to find people to believe in you, man. I didn't do this on my own. I didn't get here on my own. I had a lot of people believe in me, but you have to believe in yourself first. No one's going to believe in you until you believe in yourself. And they got to see that. They got to be convicted with that, like, man, this guy really believes in himself. And that's what Dabo talks about this day, man. This guy's running around this room and he's relentless because Dabo sees me, man. I'm stalking this guy.
You have a lot of similarities as far as it's from the outside, like I said, not knowing him personally and getting to know you. You guys have a lot of similarities on your energy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I can resonate that you guys would connect that way.
And look, a little funny story about that. Like I wear Clemson gear around. I'll be in airports, stuff like that. I've had people come up to me and ask me if I was Dabo.
Yeah.
I'll text Dabo. Has anybody ever said, hey, you look like Damon? He's like, no. But Dabo is he's as advertised, man. He's one of my best friends. And in fact, I go to Dabo for personal stuff. Like, hey, I got a question for you about something, and accessible like that. Another cool thing about Dabo, inside story, is this guy returns every text. I mean, he must get 1,000 of them in a week, 2,000 in a week, but he returns every one of them.
I was impressed. I know exactly where I was when I reached out to you. I was at a tournament with my son in Chicago, and I was literally about to order your book. This is a true story because the way I process information is, I know a lot of people they pride themselves on how many things they read. I read one book, and then I reread it 3 or 4 times in a row. And then I try to first read it just to, understand the concept of the book. Then I want to understand kind of the meaning behind it, the thought pattern. So I'll read 3 or 4 books a year, but I'll deep dive into it. So I was about to order your book. You were in my head. I started following your social media. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to see what it would take to get you to an event. And I've done that with other people before, like curious, and you don't know if you're talking to the person or not. You immediately responded, almost moments later, you put me in contact with the person. Oh, you're the biggest investment I ever had on having someone come do something like this. And that was a big leap of faith to do that.
You told me that.
Yeah.
You told me that.
So, but I was like, I could order a $30 book, or I could invest thousands of dollars to sit next to the man and hear a story personally. And I wanted everybody to feel that. And because the relationship is most important. So I think the same thing with you and Dabo, not only did you get the speaking gig, now you got a relationship. And that relationship opens so many other doors. As you've met these people and you've been in a lot of these rooms, besides kind of what you're getting and learning from these people, what's the one thing that you see kind of that is similarities across the board from all the different, you spoke for, like I said, for Nick Saban's teams and Dabo Swinney's and corporate America and all these big events. From the people who are the icons in the industry, what are the similarities you're seeing that they have that we all try to seek to grab?
And this is so I've never given this answer to this question, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot, is about they maintain the right level of proportion. Okay. And when you maintain what I mean by that is they're in these fish bowls, these worlds where microscopes are on them, these 18 to 22-year-old players, they've got this for 4 years. They're like gods. I mean, they're celebrated. They're on TV, stuff like that. But the best of the best do a good job of keeping these guys proportional in their mind. Like, hey, that's not really the real world out there. People are fawning over you because you can play a sport. Keep them present. Okay. Keep them understand. It comes with humility. Okay. There's a lot of humility. You know, you see a team like Alabama, the word humility doesn't just pop into mind, does it?
Right, yeah.
But you see the way Nick Saban runs that program, and he keeps those guys humble. I mean, there's nobody that's beyond getting a big butt chewing from Nick Saban on that team. Not the quarterback, not anybody. But humility and proportion is the way that the best of the best do that. They keep these guys' heads, well, they keep them the right size, you know, because humility is being right-sized. It's being in the right place, in the right space, and knowing your role in this world. And when you become humble and you become right-sized, you can be useful to other people, and you can become part of something bigger than you.
It's interesting because just using those two different people right there, Dabo and Nick Saban, they look like complete opposites of how they run their teams. Yeah. Complete opposite. You know, so that's why I'm always curious. Like, there's got to be, when people are at their peak, there's got to be things that are similar. They might go about doing it differently, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like, Nick comes off as this hardcore, you know, like reminds me of like the Bill Belichick or type thing. You know, when I heard Tom Brady talk a couple weeks ago, he told a story and I kind of get this insight from your story. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, everybody thinks that Tom used the chip on his shoulder about where he got picked in the draft, and he actually said his biggest motivation was he was afraid of ever letting down his mom and dad. And when I heard about your story and how your mom talked to you, right, like because that's one of my biggest things. Like, I want my parents are always proud of me. Mm-hmm. And I know I've done things sometimes where they're like, you know, why are you doing that? Even sometimes today, they're like, why am I taking some of the risk? I'm doing things like that. So he used that as a motivator. But he talked about Belichick coaching him, and he's like, he would have a bad game. Belichick would come in there cussing out in front of everybody. Like, hey, there's a quarterback at Foxborough High School that could throw better than you, right? Just rip his ass in front of everybody. Years later, he says, you know, the reason why I did that is because if I can coach you that hard in front of everybody and you're Tom Brady, I can do it to anybody.
Right.
So Tom was like, hey, you know, bring it on, right? He wanted to be coached hard. So I'm always curious how the shifts in people are, and you get to be around a lot of these big people that are done top level things in whether it be sport or the career or business, right?
What was your biggest fear, like when you got out? I said, man, my biggest fear by far was that someone was going to do a copycat crime spree like mine, because of the crimes that I committed when I broke into people's houses. They were a signature crime, meaning that no one else had ever done it before. It's like like your signature is yours. Right. That no one else had ever done it before or since. And so I was worried that someone was going to do a copycat signature crime, because there's only two people that really know how to do that. Me and my partner in crime, who also went to prison, Dustin. And I was freaked out about it. In fact, when you read The Change Agent, I describe how I did the crimes in The Change Agent. So at that point, anybody that's got 1995 can go get a book and say, that's how they do the crime. But I was terrified of that. Remember, fear. Fear isn't real. You know, but that was my fear, that someone would do a copycat crime.
Fear, I tell people, fear is a big motivator, right? And more often, it's the best motivator if you know how to use it right.
Absolutely.
But like I said, because you know it's not real, you just have to tap into it. So before your life kind of got off track, kind of finishing up here, you know, did you ever see your life? I mean, you were playing college ball, right? You want to be a professional. You're a quarterback, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was your goal, I'm assuming.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. Everybody would.
What team did you want to play for? Like, you probably dreamed that.
Oh, man. Like, growing up, I've always been, like, fans of I've always enjoyed watching good quarterbacks. So growing up, I liked Joe Montana. I liked John Elway. I'm 47.
Okay, all right.
Joe Montana, John Elway. I love Jim McMahon. Jim McMahon was brash. He had this attitude, man, stuff like that. Who
did you model your game after?
More like a Joe Montana in the sense that
he was the greatest probably before
Brady. Yeah, but and it still, he was so great with Montana. What I modeled my game, because I like to be very cerebral with the position. I think the quarterback position is very cerebral.
For sure.
A lot of stuff happens up here more so than with your legs and arm. But I had a really good arm. But what I would try to do is understand the education of the game, like reading defenses, and I put a lot of time in my week preparing for a game by watching game film. So, like Joe Montana I remember an interview he did I watched it when I was a kid in the late 80s. He's talking about being able to eliminate half of a field before the ball is snapped. Okay. Walking up to the line of scrimmage and saying, okay, I'm not even messing with that half of this play. I'm going to go in that
They're making decisions before even the decision.
Yeah, it's like but he's picking up on cues that he saw on film.
Sure.
This linebacker is leaning one way on one foot. He's putting more weight on one foot.
This is where all that prep comes in.
This is where all the prep
comes in.
Like,
well, I think Brady was so great. It's like,
Brady did the same thing.
A better student, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Brady, you have to put. I mean, how many hours of game film do you watch where you're looking for the cue that this linebacker leans a little bit one direction when he's going to go that way? Like, you've got to watch hours and hours. Like, okay,
that's where I think discipline is the separator, right?
Absolutely.
Because present time, people, it would bother me because I'm a fan of people. I am a fan of my team. And the 49ers used to be in my division, so I've seen a lot of Montana as a kid coming up. But what people say, Aaron Rodgers is the greatest quarterback, as far as talent. But I'm like, this guy's got one ring, and he seems not to be great as a teammate or a leader, and seems selfish. Now, I don't know the man, but that's perception. Perception is reality. Brady has always taken less money, had less talent on his team, but I could see that he prepared better than anybody else, and discipline's a great separator. That's why his career lasts so long. Every record, like, who knows whoever beats it, right? At some point, maybe so, but I think that's where discipline comes in, and being prepared, sacrificing going out, right? So you got this coming up. How did it go wrong for you? I know you got injured.
Yeah, but I mean, you hit the answer to the question. Discipline. I was a very undisciplined person. Okay. When it came to stuff outside of football I could be disciplined with. It was something of a goal that I had. And I always said to my dad, whenever I was in prison, my mom and my dad, they're still married, by the way. Okay. Been married for 55 years, man. Yeah. So I mean, it's like I didn't come from a broken home or even split home. And my mom and dad would come visit me. And I told my dad, Dad, I lost my way after football was over, and I got hurt in '96 against A&M.
Your identity.
My identity was wrapped up in being a college football player.
Yeah.
But I poured everything I had to playing football. Like when I was in high school, at 15, 16 years old, I'd get up in the morning at 5:45. This stuff that I do now, getting up to work out, I started doing that when I was 15 years old. And I got a tire swing in the field across the street from them. They're still doing the ground. Every one of my balls is, gets waterlogged every morning because I'm out there throwing footballs through a tire swing before anybody else is up. I'm out there running. I'm out there doing work.
So he's doing every day in the garage, training every day. Yeah.
And you have to, because that's what you want to be great at something. You have to put in the work. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I lost. Whenever I lost football, I didn't have an identity anymore. Yeah. I was lost. I didn't have a direction in life. I go off, I graduate college. I go work for a guy in Congress in Washington or the U.S. Congress. I work for a guy running for president, doing fundraising. And I've got this great book of all these donors that I had, and I became a stockbroker. And my dream, my goal in life was just make money. And that's not a real goal. That doesn't separate you from anybody else. Yeah. You can go make money. But who are you on the inside? I didn't have who I was on the inside. And so when I started slipping more into the dope world, I grabbed on the dope, and that was my new God. That's what I worship.
Your new identity.
That was my new identity, and the burglary thing, look, hey, I may be a meth addict breaking into houses, but I'm going to be the best meth addict breaking into houses. And whatever I did, I would do at full speed.
That's how you're wired in anything.
That's how I'm wired in anything.
Even with now speaking or whatever, it's like you're gonna be the best at what you do.
Absolutely. Right? And I told my dad when I was in prison, I'm going to go out there and share this story. I'm going to go out there and help other people with this. He gave me some of the best advice, Aaron. He said this. He said, listen. He said, if you're going to do that, you have to turn the weapon around on yourself and pull the trigger. Whatever weapon it is people can use against you in life, you got to use it on yourself. If you're going to go out there and tell your story, you got to own everything you've ever done. Put it out there. If you put it out there first and you own it and you walk that walk like you're sincere about it, he said, then and only then do you control your narrative. Otherwise, someone else is always going to control the narrative. So I wrote a book, The Change Agent. Right. Put in there the biggest failures in life. One of them was, if you read the book, you'll see the story about my grandmother. Hurricane Rita comes, destroys their house down there in southeast Texas. My dad drives his grandmother's 80-something-year-old grandmother to my place in Dallas. Now I'm on meth. I've got cartel guys living with me in my apartment because I've taken over my apartment because my meth debt is so big.
Right.
They delivered my 80-something-year-old grandmother to me. And my parents don't know what's going on. They don't know. I've lied to them. I told them I worked for a limousine company or something like that at the time. I don't know what it was, but they drop off my octogenarian grandmother. And man, my grandmother lives in her own filth for another month because I can't take care of her. I can't take care. I literally would. She was in my bedroom. I'd bring food in there for her 3 times a day. They gave me her credit cards to take care of her. The cartel guys got those credit cards, and it's like that's the biggest failure of my life. But I put that into a book for a couple of reasons. One, is I wanted people to see how bad addiction really is. I want people to understand how low a person will go, because addicts, I truly believe addicts aren't bad people for the most part. They're sick people that do bad things. Okay. And that's what I was in my addiction. And I had to be able to be in the position I am in life, I have to like literally go out there and pour myself out there. Like, hey, you know what? Here's all the mistakes I made. I own them. And here's what I'm doing now. Right. And it's worked. It's worked to a T, because people see that, because everybody's flawed. Everybody's made mistakes. And we want to see a champion story about someone that overcame some great adversity, someone that's human, someone that's flawed, someone that's vulnerable.
Well, I think that's probably, America loves a comeback story, and you're living representation of that. So
you always got to keep your feet on the ground and remain humble. So it all comes back to the discipline you talked about earlier. We're full circle now in this conversation. Whenever I got the big break to talk in front of Dabo's team, I can tell you the date that I talked. It was August 1st, 2017. I got out of prison November 16th, 2015. Right. So we're within 2 years of me getting out. We're at 22 months at this. Sure. What less than 22? What do we do? Yeah. 20 months maybe of walking out of prison. In that 20 months before I speak to Dabo's team, the biggest stage I've ever been on, and the most consequential presentation, because everything else in my life spun from that moment. There's not a lot of places for me to go speak in those 20 months. Literally, when I got out of prison, no one will let me go talk to their schools. You can't just go knock on the door of the school and say, I just got out of the joint, I want to talk to your kids. And they'll lock you back up. But I knew that I had this story, and I knew that I wanted to tell it, and I had to get in some reps. And
going to the gym.
Going to the gym. But how do I get in reps if I don't have a place to go? In my parents' spare bedroom, there was a mirror in there. Just some old mirror that came with the house, man. And so I lived in my parents' spare bedroom for the first 2 years out of prison. But for 20 months before that presentation to Clemson, in front of that mirror, every single day, I did one presentation, at least one presentation. And if I had somewhere else to speak that day, that would be my presentation. I got a rep in every day, man. Of this presentation you're going to hear today, that started in my parents' spare bedroom, man. That's the behind the scenes stuff. There is no such thing as overnight success. Right, That's watching the film, brother. That's it. And every day I'd go
got up this morning and went to the gym.
Yeah.
How many people were interested in going to work out this morning, but they traveled, so they didn't do it? Or
yeah, I got in at midnight to the hotel. Yeah. But I've got to do that. And I live on the road 24 days a month. Discipline is important. Discipline in what I eat, the food choices I make. I mean, you look at me, I'm a pretty slim guy. I try to I'm 47 years old.
Great. Yeah.
But I've got to do this every day. I've got to stay disciplined. Do I want to eat carrot cake? You bet. That's my kryptonite. I would love to eat carrot cake, but I don't.
Speaking of the fear, does fear ever kick in if you don't do the discipline that you could fall back?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the fear of like, hey, sliding down, because there was a time there on the road stuff, I had to get this back under control about 5 or 6 months ago. It kind of happens the same time I'm doing the Arte event in November where you see me, is, I'm traveling with my wife and I'm looking at myself in the mirror. I'm like, oh, man. But what I don't like in the mirror is the result of not doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was like, hey, I got to start running again. The winter time's coming. It's getting a little chilly. I didn't want to go outside. It's kind of like wimping out and the whole deal. And I just got to take the plunge and get back into it. So yeah, do I slip and do I slide? Yeah. But do I have fear? Yeah, I do have fear, but I know how to harness it. Like you said,
Use it as a tool.
Harness your fear. Discipline. Relationships. You talked about that a while ago. You can't underscore this enough. Relationships are everything. You and I have a relationship now, and this is going to spawn something else. And it may be something else that you keep someone to me and say, hey, Damon, this guy needs your help, or this woman needs your help, whatever it is. And I'm there because of this connection you made that day and the connection we have now. But that's what life is about. It's about, and I learned that from Dabo, being a connector. You want to be a connector. That's another big thing I learned from Dabo, being a connector.
I see that with him too. For like some perfect. Actually, matter of fact, my slogan I tell people that I've stolen from someone else is, businesses are built on relationships, and relationships are built on communication. Right? And so like everybody thinks you got to do all this fancy stuff, but the reality is when you actually are honest and care about people, and every business is people, it's more about how do you. And Z Ziegler was famous for saying you can have anything in the world you want as long as you help enough people get what they want. Yeah. And so that's the key. Is like, can you connect someone to other people and not be the person, well, I'll do that if you give me this. Well, that's not an honest relationship. That's not a relationship. That's transactional, right? So
absolutely.
So I think
serving other people.
Yeah, 100%.
Serving leadership, man.
Final question before we head off. I know you're a person of faith, and knowing your story. How have you had to lean into that? We're in a world now where it's not spoken about. It's not allowed to be spoken about. You know, how is that an asset for you in your dark times before prison, in prison, after prison? You know, how does that resonate with you, past, present, future?
Yeah. So here's the deal. What happened in my life, what's happening in my life, that is called a spiritual awakening, brother. I mean, that's not something. You look at the things that have happened. We can't even cover all the stuff. But in 7 years, and the 7 years while I was in prison, no man can do that. No human being is capable of that. That's a spiritual awakening. But that comes first from recognizing that you have zero control over those things going on around you. In fact, the 4 things you control, what you think, say, feel, and do, those are the only things you really have control over every day. But you have to surrender the rest of that stuff. Now, where are you going to surrender it to if you're not a believer, right? What are you going to just surrender to space, to the universe? Right. So I had to reconnect with God and understand that what God was doing. And I didn't get this until I walked out of prison. I'm going to tell you what happened the day I walked out. When you're sitting in a dungeon, man, and you're serving a sentence, which I earned my time. I had to go to prison because I committed crimes. I earned that. That's my time. But still, it's hard to see what the plan is. The day I'm walking out of prison, November 16th, 2015. First of all, and anybody that's ever been to prison is going to tell you this, when you walk out, the air is lighter, the sky is bluer, the grass is greener, the ground feels different under your feet. And it happens it's in your mind. It happens immediately. It feels like you're being let up from being underwater.
And you're saying basically all of us take all that for granted, basically, is what I hear when I hear that, right?
Yeah, but people that have been to prison before and get out and take it for granted, they lose sight because your mind has this thing called euphoric recall.
Gotcha.
That's where your mind likes to repeat success. It likes to forget about that. It's a defense mechanism your mind has. You get further away. Yeah, it protects you. You get further away from the bad event, and your mind forgets how bad it truly was. And that's one of the things, in recovery, I go to my AA meetings, we sit around and talk about how bad things were. So they're like, okay, I got to walk for an hour in the shoes of someone else that was in their addiction, and I don't have to go do that today.
Right.
So I'm walking out, and there's a tap on my shoulder, and it's God. This is I don't share this with every audience, but if it's an audience that it's appropriate for, here we go. God tells me, turn around. I turn around, I look at the prison, the gates, everything, the walls. He says, you're going to work for me now. And he said, you're going to have the most amazing life, and I'm going to do things in your life that people are going to be like, I've never seen this happen before. It's going to be incredible, Damon, but this is my show. The minute it becomes Damon's show, you're coming back. Do you understand? I was like, yeah, let's go. Life starts. And that's when I realized, man, he put me through all that for a reason. God literally sent a SWAT team into this apartment to get me that day on July 30th, 2008, the day I was arrested, the last day I ever smoked meth, the last day I ever did anything. This SWAT team literally comes in and plucks me out of this world that I was in. I mean, dude, my angels in life, they didn't have wings. They had assault rifles. They had shields. They had helmets. The SWAT teams of life are coming for us all the time. And it's how do we respond to that? Because in the moment we feel like, man, this is terrible. This is the worst thing in the world. But if we have faith that God's got a bigger plan, that maybe I'm going to be used for something to inspire other people by the way I recover, by the way God helps me recover from this. And it's my social media post today. It's God doesn't set bushes on fire anymore, Aaron. He sets people on fire.
Yeah.
What are you doing with that light, man? Because you are a light in this world. You got to shine, So.
Cool, man. Hey, appreciate the conversation.
Hey, brother. Thanks a lot, man.
Meet you, man.
Yeah, great to meet you.